Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and let us get started because we do have a limited amount of time and we are recording this, so people will be able to catch anything they miss at a later date. We are going to be hearing from 4 lovely speakers today besides myself. I'm the network coordinator at Fair Share CSA Coalition, which is in Madison. That means I do all the back end work for the CSA Innovation Network, which is hosting this webinar for us today. And the first person I'll introduce to you is Annikis Mauser-Martinez. So Annikis is the executive director at CityFresh and is joining us to talk about the work they've been doing in Northeast Ohio for food access with the Farm Box program. So Annikis, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with this. Hopefully this goes to the right thing. Nope. It did not. There we are. Sorry about that. Technology. So I'm with CityFresh. We are a farm box program. So we used to use the term CSA a little bit more, but we're pretty non-traditional as we're an aggregate and not a farmer directly, but we use sort of the model. And we have existed since 2005 in this capacity, although we have some pre-existing programs as well. Most of what we do is our Farm Box program, and it is specifically geared to low access communities in Northeast Ohio. So our focus is on the USDA food desert census tracts, although we have stops throughout Northeast Ohio. We operate in 2 counties, in Cuyahoga and Lorain counties, so that encompasses greater Cleveland and Oberlin, Ohio. We offer week-to-week ordering, which is a very different sort of model in order to make things more accessible. So no one has to order our full season up front. They just do a week at a time. And this is one of the ways in which we really create access. We also offer tiered pricing. So our shares come in 2 sizes, family and single, and those are tiered for anyone at 200% of the federal poverty level or below. And we use that as a self-declaration. They don't have to give us any materials. It's just, yes, they check a box. And we also accept SNAP. So that, and the SNAP is how we are able to do many of our nutrition incentive programs as part of that as well, which I will get into. We aggregate from mostly Amish farmers in Ashland and Lorain counties, and about 6 to 12. We have like 6 core farmers that we aggregate from and have been working with as an organization since the 90s. So our founders have been working for a long time with these folks. And we have what we call fresh stops throughout. We have 15 of them throughout Northeast Ohio. And they're primarily run by volunteers or partner organizations. So that's how we're able to maintain that. We operate on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays generally, although we've done Monday through Friday. We have to kind of abide by the Amish schedule. So that does make things a little complicated because they do not use computers. So while all of our orders come in online for the most part, we have to deliver our orders by hand, which is a little cumbersome. It's an interesting translation between customers who all want to do everything on their phone and the Amish who have no idea what we're talking about. Anyway, moving on. So our primary incentive program that we use is the Produce Perks program, which you will hear from Produce Perks Midwest shortly. That's Ohio's nutrition incentive program, like the big one. It's through the GusNIP Finney grants, I believe. I don't actually write those grants, so I'm not going to speak super authoritatively on those, but that offers what is in some states called double up bucks, or the matching, the dollar for dollar matching programs. And last year we had 167 Produce Perks participants. So the way that that works is it gives our customers a half off of our retail cost for our shares. Our shares are $35 for the family share and $22 for the single share. And you can see that we had almost $5,000 in incentives distributed. This is actually down a little bit. Our biggest year was probably 2020. We've seen a lot of folks with pandemic EBT who have been able to use that for our shares. The way we're able to do that is because we're week to week though too. That makes it it has a very big difference for us that we're able to match those SNAP dollars. The other big program that we launched last year in conjunction with Produce Perks Midwest is the TANF fruit and vegetable program, which accesses TANF funds through the state. That's temporary assistance for needy families, which is federal funds, but through the state dollars. And we were able to offer 45 families 16 weeks of shares free of charge. So these are folks who are TANF eligible, but not necessarily SNAP eligible. So this opened the door in a big way for folks who could to access fruits and vegetables pretty affordably. They also had optional delivery with DoorDash, which is an interesting pilot program we've been working with. It has its ups and downs as we figure those things out. But that is like a program that we're super excited about. We were able to extend that this year. So these are 2022 numbers. And in 2023, we actually extended it to 58 families. So we're hoping to see that program grow. The families have adored it. The TANF eligibility, by the way, is 200% of the federal poverty level with a child in the home. So it doesn't have to be your child, but a child living with you. And those are also have like a self-attestation that we have to do that's HIPAA compliant, which Produce Perks Midwest has managed for us pretty effectively. We originally got involved with the incentive programs through our local Produce Perks management, which is through. I'm always a little confused about how all these parts work together, but we have some local folks who manage that in our area, and that's through our Ohio State University extension program that they're actually employed, but they do this management of incentive programs. The other incentive programs we've participated in the past include the Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which in our area is managed by the Western Reserve Area Agency on Aging. And we've also accept WIC Perks and Produce Prescription, which are different coupon incentive programs that are also mentioned through OSU Extension and have various lines of funding. All these programs are administrated by other folks, and we simply are able to participate and accept those the coupons for them. And then I just have some facts about what we do. We have quite a large group of volunteers that help manage our site. And aside from our nutrition incentive programs that we utilize that I've listed here, we also subsidize our low-income shares for anyone at 200% of the federal poverty level or below. They are able to access a lesser rate. So for our family share, which is $35, typically that reduces the cost to $22. Those using SNAP who get the Produce Perks incentive added to it get that at $18 instead of $17 or instead of $35. So it's half. And our single share, similarly, we offer it at the regular rate is $22. The limited income rate is $13. These are just arbitrary numbers, but and then with the SNAP incentive, it's $11. So our whole program is really geared toward making sure that anyone can access this and trying to draw folks in from low access areas and who are able to just get fresh local foods. we've been doing this for a very long time, and we have distributed hundreds of thousands of pounds. We've done almost 200,000 shares since 2005. So I'm not sure the exact number though. And that is just a little bit about City Fresh. I'm going to stop babbling.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annika. That was really great to hear about your program, and perfectly leads into Tevis talking about Produce Perks, which is also out of Ohio. So yeah, Tevis, you can go ahead and spend a few minutes talking about what you do.
Thank you, Sadie, and thanks, Annika. That was a great example of an organizational partner that we work with in Ohio. And I'll get into some of that here in a few minutes, but welcome all and good morning. My name is Tevis Foreman, and I serve as the Executive Director of Produce Perks Midwest. We're a 501c3 located in Cincinnati, Ohio, though we do work across the state. And in short, we serve as Ohio's lead agency administering nutrition incentive programming statewide. We do this in collaboration with the Ohio Nutrition, the Ohio Nutrition Incentive Network. We acronize it as ONIN, OHNIN. Again, it's the Ohio Nutrition Incentive Network. And ONIN has really been well, first it's a statewide, it's a statewide coalition comprised of nonprofits, state agencies, academic institutions, and other partners helping to really lead nutrition incentive programming throughout Ohio. So us as a 501c3 in collaboration with all of the partners within ONIN has really helped to advance and scale the work of nutrition incentive programming throughout Ohio. So again, we serve as that lead agency. So, we receive the federal awards through GusNIP, and I'll get into some of the funding streams that we administer and manage, but again, all to advance and support the organizations and the local farmers and the markets and the retailers that are offering and administering nutrition incentive programming throughout Ohio. As Annika was mentioning earlier, through our Produce Perks program, which serves SNAP beneficiaries, and it's Ohio's, Double Up Bucks program. It provides a dollar for dollar match on the SNAP dollar. That is supported through GusNIP. We've received 2 awards, once when it was Finney, and then when it transitioned to the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program. We also are actively managing a GusNIP award in support of our produce prescription programming. So those are 2 federal awards that are supporting both Produce Perks as well as PRX programming in Ohio. And the PRX programming works with, organizations such as City Fresh to build that access to the healthy foods. But we work very closely with, a variety of healthcare providers, large healthcare systems such as Bon Secours, Mercy Health, Cleveland Clinic, down to school-based health centers and municipal, county level clinics as well. So we work with a diverse range of clinical partners to advance our PRX programming. And I referenced the federal support through GusNIP for PRX, but the Ohio Department of Health, our state agency here, has been very active and supportive in helping to fund and lead nutrition incentive programming, notably PRX programming as well here in Ohio. So we're very fortunate to have both federal as well as state level support. And at that state level, I'll also speak to the TANF funding that Annika was mentioning earlier, in that TANF is temporary assistance for needy families. It's a federal block grant that the state receives. And through the past 3 budget cycles here in Ohio, we've been fortunate to have support from our state legislators to advance nutrition incentive programming. And they've been funding that through the TANF block grant. Now, I'll be the first to say, I don't think that it's the most sustainable state level stream of support for nutrition incentive programming. For one, it's a federal block grant, so it can't be used to leverage federal dollars. So it doesn't serve as a match for GusNIP. However, it has really allowed us to expand the populations, the households we're able to reach beyond SNAP. It's allowed us to really pilot innovative approaches from accessibility to delivery and other in regards to connecting eligible households to the local producers and or the organizations that are serving the shared populations, as well as that direct contact to the producers. So it's that TANF funding has really allowed us to pilot and scale in a lot of ways, innovative approaches, again, to providing that financial resource for the households we're seeking to serve. And I'll quickly just note that the healthcare systems that we work with here in Ohio have been strong financial supporters of our work as well. We've been very candid with them in the context that, the benefits and the impact of this work certainly speak for themselves, at a local level up to a federal level. And that's not lost on them. But again, we've been very candid with them and what we believe their role is to play, both as a healthcare provider, a stakeholder in this work in a broader sense, but also as a funding partner as well. And they've been receptive to that and very supportive. And it too has allowed us to innovate and scale in a variety of ways, and happy to get into some of those weeds. But the healthcare system providers as well as payers are certainly worth noting as strong supporters, not just from a delivery of programming, but also as a stakeholder in this work. And I think I'll stop there. Happy to, again, expand upon how we're partnering with organizations, with local producers, and how we're seeking to really just be innovative with the monies that we're managing in support of nutrition incentive programming. But I'll pass it on to our next speaker for now.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Tevis. I think that focus on wellness is something that the Innovation Network has been tapping into recently, and we're excited to see where that goes and who we can pull into those conversations. Up next, we're going to hear briefly from Michelle. So Michelle's from Glenwood, which is out of New York, and Associate Director of Regional Food Programming, and also implementing the CSA SNAP program. So yeah, go ahead and share with us, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Sadie. I have a couple of slides to share with you all, mostly to keep myself organized. Let's see if I can. How does that look? Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so Glenwood is a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a more just and resilient food system in the Hudson Valley. We have both a working farm with a livestock and vegetable operation, which primarily distributes through CSA. And we also run programs in two areas, our farmer training program and the program that I work in, which is the regional food program. And the regional food, oh, I'm at the end. The regional food program is, oops, sorry, bear with me, folks. Yes, we facilitate the Hudson Valley CSA Coalition, which has been participating in the CSA Innovation Network for a number of years. Mostly my colleagues Megan Larmer and Kaden Stryker are participating, and that really just grew out of the desire of the farms in the Hudson Valley. So the Hudson Valley we consider the 10 counties bordering the Hudson River, which goes from New York City about 150 miles north. And so these farms really wanted to bring the CSA model to more of our neighbors and community members. And from the very beginning, they really wanted to make sure that, that low-income folks were included in that. And so finding a way to make shares more affordable was really a priority from the beginning. And so because the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive funding exists and is and SNAP is the most well-funded and consistently funded and well-known program to address food insecurity in the country, we decided that we wanted to take that approach. Although, there were other farms in our network using sliding scale models and finding other ways to create affordability and access. But yeah, that was sort of the reason for taking this approach. And so I'll just, we received a GusNet pilot grant in 2019. So just a very small grant to launch with 5 farms. And the idea was to partner with healthcare centers. And so that was quickly, became apparent that launching in the spring of 2020 was not going to be possible. And so that's kind of really shaped the program and the way that we've done our outreach since then. We started out with a revolving incentive model. And so the idea was that we would pay the farmers upfront for their shares because we really felt that it was important that that CSA worked for them the way that it typically does with the upfront payments. And then they would collect, we would subsidize the shares at 50%. And so the farms would collect the 50% payment from the customers weekly and then pay that back into the fund at the end of the year. So as you can tell, it was a bit complicated. It's hard to explain to people. It was a bit hard to explain to USDA and to other funders. And also, it just functionally was a bit challenging. And so what we've done this year is we now pay farms for the 50% of the share value, just rather than having this sort of revolving fund. So it's created a few different issues. One is there's no longer a return to the fund, and so it's not really recapitalized in the same way, although it was just a partial return. And also, but it's also allowed us to provide more shares with the same amount of funding. So that is helpful. But then, as I was talking to Holly yesterday, it's kind of put the risk back on the farm. And so we're really trying to figure out how the program can, keep that risk rather than passing it on to the customer. And so we've also gone with a decentralized SNAP processing model. And so we help the farms, get their FNS numbers, become, get set up with their equipment, figure out who's, what third-party processor they're going to use. It takes the administrative burden off of us as a program, and it also builds their capacity so that they can then process SNAP, wherever they want to in other markets and at other distribution sites. And so we started out, like I was saying, with 50 shares, about a $30,000 total value, and we've kind of kept the program at the same level for the past. We're going now into we're in our 3rd season, and so this year we can subsidize up to 100 shares, but outreach is a challenge. So we'll see if we actually get up to that number. I think it may be closer to 80. And the farms set their own share price, and the customers pay weekly about, sorry about that, $11 to $17. These are just some of our marketing materials that we've used. We have a little zine, just, we found that folks really need just a little bit of support to figure out how to use their shares and that kind of thing, like as most CSA members do. We have them available here if you'd like to see more. And just like the member commitment with CSA is really hard when folks are paying weekly. And as I was saying, it doesn't seem, it's not right to pass that on to the customer, that risk. And so, we want to have maximum flexibility for the customer, but then also make sure that the farm is getting paid. And so we're just always trying to balance that. And yeah, we're currently have an application out with GusNIP and waiting to hear if we will fund that. That would allow us to expand the program up to 30 farms over the next 3 years. So that would be, would be really great. The customer experience, we just think about, having most CSA customers can just, they pay ahead, they come, they pick up their share, they can be on their way. But just having that extra, having to do a transaction we're just very aware that it could potentially increase or like just make people feel uncomfortable or increase the stigma around SNAP. So we're just always trying to make the SNAP customer experience be the same as any other CSA customer. And then just, there are always transaction issues with the EBT terminals. But now we're really excited. We're now using Grown By as our registration site for Glenwood's farm, which is one of the participating farms in the program. And we're working on supporting other farms to get set up with Grown By as well. Because we have this decentralized model, this will work well for us, although it will not work well, I think, for other folks who want to, as you'll hear from Holly next, I think like for programs like that, it won't quite work in the same way. But this will help solve some of the transaction issues, the potential stigmatizing, and also just and a little bit of the sort of there is an automated aspect to it, and so that I think will help. We also launched an ambassador program, which I'm happy to talk more about at some point, but we're just working with members who've been members of CSA and used SNAP benefits and supporting them and resourcing them to spread the word to other SNAP customers. And we're just right now revisiting healthcare collaborations and seeing what that might lead to, but that's sort of where the future is.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. I really like how you gave us a perfect segue into hearing from Holly about some of the nuances that exist based on state by state differences or just how programs are set up. So Holly is joining us from the PNW CSA Coalition, and we'll spend a few minutes talking about what it looks like on the West Coast. Holly, I think you are still muted.
Okay, how's that?
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I just switched to my earbuds because there's a roofer pounding right outside, like on my roof. So it's really loud. So let me know if the audio thing goes haywire. Michelle, I have to say, I love your zine. Like I've been using your zine and referring to it for like 3 years. I love it. It's adorable.
Yay,
and
great.
Useful, really helpful. So thank you for that. So let's go on here. Okay, so just some details about our program. I love hearing all the different systems in all the different states. Like people have really come up with creative and effective programs, and I love hearing about all of these. Our program has been running since about 2016. It originally was a NIFA grant, and we've funded it a little bit differently since then after that pilot was over. But so we really have been at it for 7 years, and there's been a lot of learning, and we've gotten better at it. So we're kind of sophisticated at this point. This year we're processing for 65 farms throughout the state. It's going to be about 480 shares total, although we haven't done the winter signups yet. Winter season has been growing for us. And I estimate that we're going to process about $325,000 by the end of the year. That's a combination of SNAP and our Double Up Food Bucks program. So I just wanted to share the technical details about it, what it looks like, how it works. So the farmers have to sign up with our coalition. We are similar to Ohio. We are the state subcontractor for distributing our Double Up Food Bucks incentive program. So the farmers have to be part of our coalition. We collect their contact info, a W-9. We have them walk through an agreement about what they're allowed to consider SNAP and Double Up Food Bucks and what they're not. So it's just some little technical things. It's the farmer's responsibility to recruit members, and each of them has a little bit of different way, but the most common ones we see is, they put the information that they accept SNAP on their websites. They talk to their members about it. The members spread the word. We have some promotional material that we try to get around as much as possible. But the farmers do recruit their own members. Once they have a member that wants to pay with their EBT, they enroll them with us through a Google form. And so the payment relationship is between the member and our coalition, but the food relationship is between the member and the farmer. Once we have that member's information, we contact them via email. There's an agreement form that the member has to fill out, and it talks about, this is the way the program works. This is how much you're going to be paying each month. And the member has to acknowledge that if they can't make the payment, their farmer doesn't get the money. So that's how we handle the farmer risk aspect of it, is the members have to acknowledge that their farmers are not going to receive the funds if the members can't pay their payment. Then through this system, they also fill out the offline vouchers, because we process all of our cards versus offline voucher. When the members sign the agreement with us, they tell us what day they receive their benefits. And so our system is set up so our processor will try to run the transaction on the day they receive their payments. And so that's how we mitigate the risk of trying to take a payment from a card where the benefits have already been spent. And of course, we communicate this to the member. And then the payments are spread evenly over the months that they receive their shares. And then once a quarter, we take all the money that was received and cut checks for the farmers. I wish we could do it every month, but we don't have the staff for that, and it's a resource-driven problem. So how does our Double Up Food Bucks incentive program work? We cover 50% of the total cost of the share. Of course, it applies to fruits and vegetables only. And we have a lot of farmers that do add-ons, like sometimes it's a chicken, sometimes it's eggs, but a lot of different or flowers. And so when the farmer signs up the member, they tell us, like, this is the value of the vegetables and this is the value of the non-vegetables. And so we subtract it, so they're only getting Double Up Food Bucks for the Double Up Food Bucks eligible items. The Double Up Food Bucks is accrued only as the SNAP is spent. That's a little bit of a risk for the farmer. If their member can't make the payment, they're not going to get the funds. And so we email them. If we're not able to make a payment, we'll send an email to the member and to the farmer, like, hey, we couldn't get the funds this month. What is your plan? So the farmer knows right at the beginning of the month whether or not they're going to be delivering the shares to that particular member. And also, if a lot of these times when we have a problem with the transaction, it's temporary, like they didn't renew their card, or there can be a number of reasons. And so then that payment rolls over into the next month. So if they can't make it 1 month, we'll try to collect it that second month. And if they can't make it that second month, they'll get another email, and we'll try to figure out, is there an alternate payment they can make to the farmer? Does the farmer need to terminate that member? And so we're really on top of the communication between what's going on. And we also have a spreadsheet that the farmers can access, so they can see each of their members and whether or not the payment was successful. And that works better for some farmers than others. Some farmers are happy to work with spreadsheets. Some of them are not. So there's a little bit of communication that we do to make that work for everybody. I always get the most questions about funding. So like I said, originally it was a NIFA funded pilot, but when that ran out, we were funded by GusNIP. And 2 years later, in 2019, we lobbied the state for a bill to fund the program. And our initial line item in the state budget was $2 million. And 2 years later, we were able to advance that to $4 million. And then we used that state money as seed money to as matching money for our GusNIP grants. And that's worked really well. That $4 million is split between all the food access organizations in the state. The Farmers Market Fund, which is really mostly a financial nonprofit that manages Double O Food Bucks. They're the ones that write the grants, and they're the ones that subcontract with our Department of Human Services in the state. And then the Oregon Farmers Market Association, the Oregon Food Bank, and we do have a contract lobbyist that helps us. The American Heart Association donates her time to us to help us navigate the intricacies of trying to get a bill passed with the state. And here's a copy of our promotional material. So when a farmer signs up with us, we'll mail them these cards, as many as they want. I've got 5,000 of them in my attic. We have them in Spanish too, of course. We also have a website where people can search for farms, and we have a attribute that talks about payment methods. So if people want to find a farm that accepts SNAP, they can use that as a filter and filter out the farms that don't. And that has become, I think, a more utilized tool each year. Oh, here's the back of the card. I think if I were to produce this again, we would just have less words because nobody actually reads this stuff. Yeah, that's all. That's the highlights of how our program works.
Great, thank you, Holly. I am just going to spend a couple minutes talking about Fair Share's Partner Shares program out of Wisconsin, but I did love seeing the promotional materials that you have from P&W. We typically promote our Partner Shares program in conjunction with CSA signups each year. We always have a waiting list for our Partner Shares program. So it is promoted over the winter, and then essentially it ends up closing around like late January, early February before CSA shares start for the season. So because I'll talk about this in a moment, we have a relatively small pool of funding to draw upon. We always end up hitting that cap of participation. So aren't doing, year-round promotion of Partner Shares per se. So what Partner Shares is through our CSA coalition. We've got member farms all around Wisconsin, some in Minnesota, Illinois, down to Missouri, and then a few in Ohio now. My colleague Beth is on the line. She's our Ohio colleague. And farms who are endorsed through Fair Share are eligible to have Partner Shares participants become CSA members at their farms. So those are any community members who are at or below the 200% federal poverty level, are eligible for SNAP benefits. They are eligible to go onto our website or get a paper application for Partner Shares and decide where they fall on the sliding scale level. So we cover either 25, 50, or 75% of a CSA share, up to $350 for that seasonal purchase, depending on where people place themselves on the sliding scale eligibility determiner. And then at Fair Share, similar to what Holly was talking about, like we are the ones who collect payments from the members and then disperse those funds back to the farms on a regular schedule with post-dated checks, or sometimes people will be able to just send us the full season amount, and then we divvy that up month by month and send those funds back to the farms. So people can use our farm search tool to find farms that meet their needs based on location or type of products. And again, whether they are in an endorsed farm, which means that they will be able to be a participant for the Partner Shares program. Last year, we distributed about $110,000 of CSA food products to about 1,200 individuals across 75 households, or more, 162 households, and 75 of those used SNAP to purchase their CSA, as opposed to just getting that subsidized assistance on the sliding scale. So there's a combination of those factors could be utilized by the participants, either just sliding scale and getting partial assistance, or using SNAP to purchase with or without that assistance coming into play. So that money, it was exhausted from a few different sources. We have a few local partners out of the Madison or Wisconsin areas that are private funders for the Partner Shares program to give us some resources to draw upon there, along with an annual fundraising event that we do. A lot called Bike the Barns, which is a big community event in September. And then we do multiple campaigns throughout the year just to get individual donors to contribute to fund those food subsidies. There's been a couple of small grants that have expanded our functionality slightly, such as an Otto Brimmer grant, which is just from a private foundation here in Wisconsin, gave us I think like $5,000 or $10,000 extra dollars to disperse after our initial funds had run out. This year, we were able to draw from the wait list and get a few more households signed up. So we're always just looking to mostly those private or smaller funding pools have not yet been able to draw upon federal or state funds to fund most of those subsidies for Fair Shares Partner Shares program. But we do still reach a good number of households. So, and again, I'll reiterate, I said this at the beginning, I'm not the Partner Shares program manager. My colleague Liv is the one who manages this program and has for years. She's in Germany currently. So I've linked in our resource document that we will send out after this call, the Partner Shares website. And there are all of the details there, along with being able to contact Liv if you were interested in reaching out to her about even more of the nitty-gritty logistics of how it works in Wisconsin. I hope I gave it a worthy, quick summary from our perspective here. And Beth, yes, thank you for calling out. With Beth's role open in Ohio now, we've been working with Produce Perks Midwest to be able to implement some more access to CSA for those eligible families. So it's been nice to see it grow outside of Wisconsin this past year. All right. So I think that's everything that we had to share. We were about, 45 minutes into the hour and a half we had scheduled. So hopefully we can have a nice, robust discussion and conversation about what everyone has shared with us so far. Feel free, those of you who are guests today, to come off mute or turn your cameras on to ask any questions, or you can just type them into the chat. I'll get us kicked off with a few questions that we had ahead of time and submitted. And then that will, spur the conversation, and feel free to just bring up anything that you want to ask our presenters today. So first, I just want to pose this question to essentially each of our speakers. All of the work that we're talking about is just about getting more people fresh food, just enhancing food access, making it affordable. And we also want to balance supporting farmers and producers, not just asking them to subsidize the cost of the CSAs and farm boxes that they're putting together. So can you give us just the quick mission-driven approach, or what mindset you look to balance out those two conflicting interests? So supporting farmers and then, making farm fresh food affordable for community members. How do you balance those?
I can start. So I'm definitely, this model where they don't get the money up front is a higher risk to them, to the farmers, than a traditional CSA model. And so, yeah, they don't get all the money at the beginning of the season. And I've talked to lots of them about like, what is the impact? And for us, it looks like we like our biggest, like our farms that have the most SNAP members, they only 5% of their members are actually paying with SNAP. And so it ends up not being a tremendous part of their business model. A lot of our farms, well, some of our farms, you know, have it in their own personal mission to feed people who pay with SNAP, and they deliberately set aside a certain number of shares. And so as their programs fill up, they'll stop selling at some point, so that number of shares can be purchased by people with SNAP. And some years we have farms that, you know, much as they want to provide this type of share, they never find any members who want to pay with SNAP. So it turns out not to be much of a risk, because it's just such a small part of their membership to begin with.
Yeah, we've found the same thing. I think, you know, maybe unfortunately, because we started out with this revolving loan fund model where we were paying the farms up front, and we found that because the number of SNAP shares was such a small portion of the overall membership, that it wasn't essential for farms to be paid up front like that. And a lot of them weren't even invoicing us at the beginning of the season when they could. And so that's where we said, well, let's just pay the 50% once we have a good handle on the enrollment numbers. And I think so right. So I think from that perspective, it's okay to kind of, you know, get a little bit away from the standard CSA model in this case. But at the same time, I think it just, for us, I think it's just shows the need to do a little bit more outreach and just do a little bit more customer education and really try to understand why the CSA model might not be appealing to people with SNAP, or why they don't. Yeah, there's some, you know, and also we just consider that, you know, for a lot of people, it just may not be that compatible because they have a limited SNAP allotment for the month, and it doesn't really go that far, especially now that the COVID additional the pandemic SNAP has been ended. And so I think it's just still finding. So I think there are other programs that we're also doing, like our food sovereignty fund and other work to get to make sure that people can get the highest quality food for free. That's why I was really interested to hear about this TANF model. I don't know that I actually had this question for Tevis, like whether that block grant is specific to Ohio, or if you know if there are other states in the country that have that funding stream.
Yeah, I believe each state receives a TANF block grant, if I'm not mistaken. It's not specific to Ohio. And there's a lot I don't know about it, so I'll say that as well. Right. And I said earlier that it's not a long-term solution, in my opinion, from state level investment in this work, but it certainly has helped set the stage here in Ohio for state legislators and the General Assembly to understand the work of nutrition incentive programming and to be able to kind of tangibly see their investment and the impacts that it has. So it has certainly sent us down the right path as far as the relationship building with the state, them being pleased with the investments that they're making. But to the question, and I can speak from a non-SNAP perspective, because I echo, again, not from a producer perspective, but from what I've heard from our producers, it's a similar experience, and City Fresh certainly might be able to speak to some of that also. But I can give a little insight to what the TANF funding allows us to do within the CSA model, is that, you know, in short, it allows the producer, the farmer, to charge a fair market rate for their produce, right? One that honors the land and labor and so forth. And those are values that we hold. So as we're subsidizing the entire share of the, for that customer, we're able to meet that farmer, that producer at the market rate that they need to charge accordingly. And so, I mean, that's in short my answer to the question. And it's been exciting to watch how we partner with organizations across the state. And I'll maybe reference some of the work we're doing here in Cincinnati in the context of we contract directly with a local producer or two, and we work through partnerships at a municipal level through the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, as well as the Cincinnati Health Department, to work within neighborhoods that there's low-income neighborhoods where we can almost have a centralized location for drop-off as well as engagement and enrollment into the program within those residents. And again, the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority plays a pretty pivotal role in that engagement process again. But it allows us to contract directly with producers here in Cincinnati to ensure grow their shares accordingly for these respective households. And it's been a food access model that has really been foreign and new, the CSA model that is, to a lot of these residents. And it's been exciting over the years to see their reception to it, their adoption of it, as far as how it becomes a pretty consistent access piece on a weekly basis. That's a community event that I have to head to here shortly, is some of that work that we do through the CSA model here in Cincinnati with Mustard Seed Farm, to give them a shout out. Yeah, and I'm getting a bit long-winded here, so I'll wrap up in that it's allowed us to kind of bridge that pricing gap, Sadie, to your question, right? Allows, that funding at least allows us to work directly with that farmer to where they can sell their shares at a fair market rate, and we can meet them there on behalf of the customer. And again, I echo, it's a different scenario with the CSAs that utilize produce perks, and where that customer is choosing to use their SNAP dollars, and then we match a dollar for dollar on those shares. It's separate from that and provides more flexibility than the limitations and regulations from the SNAP perspective.
I'm going to sort of echo. I think that one of the big things that we've experienced is that it's actually, I think, harder for us to find participants than it is for us to find food. And we have to do, I think that we at City Fresh kind of take on that risk in a big way, and we have to make sure that we're doing the fundraising to subsidize those shares, and to subsidize the food that low-income folks are going to get, that, because we have multiple ways that we do that. So we're taking on that burden for the farmers. The only difference is that we're not doing the upfront thing for the whole season, but it is a guaranteed revenue stream for our farmers. And I think that that's a big reason why, it's really why we've worked with the Amish in a big way in our particular situation, is because they, one, produce the volume that we need, and our urban farmers in our area are not doing that. And most of the other farmers are not producing food. They're producing commodity crops in Ohio currently. So we don't have a lot of like CSA strict farms, except for like small nonprofits or cooperatives. So that's part of what, is the limitation of the program itself. But I really see us as like a pipeline. And a lot of what we're doing is advocacy for local foods, for the consumer, to help them eat seasonally. And that, so much of what we do is nutritional education programming, and doing things like producing newsletters and producing materials and social media, and, really just shifting our focus to that. And we have this peer-to-peer network with all of the customers and with the volunteers. And that's really core, like this community building aspect of it, where folks are really talking to each other about how to prepare foods, how to eat them. And we have to do a lot of outreach when it comes to, I think, our low-income customers. We have not had consistency. So I kind of want to bring it back to some of these other questions that are popping up in the chat. CSA is kind of hard for people, like for individuals, and, you know, living in a hustly world, everybody's trying to get by, and we need to, you know, it can be really challenging. And I think too, because it's such a noble thing, everyone thinks they have to do it perfectly, you know? And that's hard. You know, the complaint that we get is that people can't use all the food, or it's not stuff they like, or they're, you know, they're not choosing every single item that they're getting. So those are real obstacles. And when it comes to low income folks and people who don't have access to fresh local foods, in addition to not having that choice there, those are obstacles on top of the other obstacles they face, like transportation, like time, like materials in the kitchen. So there's a lot of work to be done in order to overcome that. And I don't believe that it should be on the farmers to solve those issues. And I think that that's why it's so important that organizations like all of ours exist, to sort of bridge these gaps and try to find ways to make sure that both things are happening, because clearly the market is not producing the solution. I think that partnering with other organizations, with community partners, with coalitions, with anyone doing food access or nutrition incentive programming in your state is going to be the scenario that needs to happen. So the question in Massachusetts, find whoever is doing this work and start talking about how can we make sure that there is some kind of way that we can fund this. Because waiting for payments can be really challenging. And I don't think that that burden should fall on either the customer or the producer. You know, we need these middle folks like us.
I don't know if I can just jump in. That's so well said. And I guess that's really, yeah, I think that was just really spot on. Yeah, and to the specific question about Massachusetts, Massachusetts is like, you know, us in New York, we're always looking over there. They're like way ahead on everything. But there is a HIP program in Massachusetts. And so there's an automatic, it works, folks get a card if you have SNAP, where you get an automatic additional benefit to use on local food that you can use at farmers markets or CSAs. And it's all automated. And so when you use your SNAP card, you get an extra, like this, the extra incentive is just automatically put back onto your card so that you can spend it anywhere where SNAP is accepted. So it's pretty awesome. And so I think in Massachusetts, if farms were just, you know, become SNAP vendors, like through FNS, then they are able to participate in that program. And I think there is like an additional enrollment that you have to do to make sure that you're an official vendor, but it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah. I just posted in the chat, I have to jump. I really appreciate the time today, everybody. But I wanted to give a quick response to James's question, and it's unique at times based on the funding source, but we can often front monies to that farmer in some respects, right? If we it's dependent upon the funding source, so it's tough to speak specifically or broadly to some of it, but we're able to typically offer an advance to those producers in some capacity. Yeah. But thank you all. I apologize for having to leave early, but take care.
Bye, Travis.
Great. Yeah, I think I would love to dig into a little bit more around James's question, and maybe taking the perspective of where that SNAP processing happens, and like the challenges around organizations being the SNAP processor can lead to holdups of funds, a bottleneck on getting it to the farms versus the hoops that farms have to jump through to become their own SNAP processor. I'm going to drop the link as well for Something relatively new on the horizon. Eric from Grown By was on the call for a little bit earlier. Their organization in partnership with Market Link is just now starting to implement being able to process SNAP online. So I'd love to hear how some of your organizations envision bridging some of those gaps and overcoming the challenges, either on the organizational side, with online SNAP on the horizon, or helping farms access that functionality, just to reduce those burdens.
I can start us off here. So I think one of the main reasons farmers join our coalition is because we do the processing for them, and that eliminates the need for them to get their own FNS number and to hire a third-party processor. And we all know the complications that run with doing the SNAP processing. And maybe this is in Oregon, but a lot of my farmers, like, we have a lot of tiny farms, like half-acre farms, single person, owner operator, and they just don't want to deal with the paperwork. And so when they have us to do all the paperwork and say, this member didn't make their payment this month, like it's they really are appreciative that they don't have to do that work. And unfortunately, this doesn't make it easy for an online SNAP situation, because to do that, to use the Grown By program, they actually do have to have their own FNS number and do their own processing. And so that might work for farms that have, there are larger farms and have staff that can run this. But for our small farms, it's probably not going to be a great solution for them. I mean, we make it really easy. The transaction is really easy for the farmer. And I think that's a lot of what they appreciate, is they can spend their time farming. And then there was a question about what farms do we typically have in our program. So at the beginning, I said we have 65 farms. Some of them have as few as 15 CSA members and maybe a quarter to a half acre. And then some are gigantic and they have 500 members and 200-acre farms. And so it really does span the whole gamut of diversified veg farms. What else was I going to say? Well, I can't remember, so someone else can talk.
Yeah, I guess, as a kind of counterpoint to Holly, we've kind of taken the opposite tack and decided that, we really don't have the internal capacity. And we saw it early on, taking on the processing as sort of a hurdle to scaling. Although you've been able to scale the program pretty well in Oregon, so that's amazing. Yeah, and we don't have any dedicated staff just to do the processing, and so we also just felt that it was important to build the capacity for the farms. And so I think that's because we've developed this model, it's going to allow us to transition to online SNAP, I think, pretty easily. So in preparation for that, I got Glenwood set up on Grown By, and so we've started using the platform, and it's it's been working pretty well. We've also been using it for a few other sort of like partnership kind of subsidized CSA boxes that we're working with that are not under the CSA as a SNAP program precisely. And we were hoping that we would, right, as Holly was saying, be able to have one FNS number and process SNAP on behalf of all of the partner farms, but unfortunately that's not going to be the case. And so, in conversation with Grown By, they also said that the USDA is getting away from even, I think, allowing, the way that farmers markets work with having this centralized processing. They're sort of getting away from that model and wanting each farm to have their own FNS number and be licensed through a third-party processor. So I don't know, what the timeline for that might be, or, if they'll change their minds on that. But I think I can see the benefits and the sort of challenges with that, but I think, yeah, so in preparation, we've just kind of been getting ourselves as Glenwood's farm up and running with that. And so we're in line to launch in New York as soon as it's available. They Grown by started working with a farm in New Orleans. I think that's like fully up and running. And I think a few others in New York may already be up and running. But yeah, we're just sort of hoping to just do that technical assistance for the farms as we've been doing for sort of the, traditional processing track to do the same thing for online and get folks set up.
So one thing I do want to throw out there. Oh, I'm so sorry, Michelle.
Oh, yeah, no, and I just wanted to say, yeah, and the farms that we're working with are also pretty small. I'd say, yeah, I mean, a few staff people and, certainly less than 50 acres for the most part.
I just wanted to throw out there that my SNAP program manager is currently revising his guide. He put, so Brian Allen 10 years ago wrote a guide for how farmers get their own FNS number. We've got the old one on our website, but for farms that do want to do their own FNS processing, sometimes it can be complicated to go through the whole paperwork procedure. And so he put together a guide and he's in the process of revising it. So we should have that out in a couple of months. So everyone, all of you can have access to that to help your farmers. We get requests for it all the time. So Brian is a farmer, so it's hard to get him to be able to spend time on this like during the middle of the high season. But in a few months, we'll have that ready for everyone.
That's awesome. I'm going to keep an eye out for that, Holly. We have like a 2-pager that we share with folks, kind of like an FAQ that sort of answers a lot of questions and and guides them to the reimbursement program. So the market link is the federal program where they can get 1 year of licensing fees covered. And then in New York State, we have our Farmers Market Federation, which covers reimburses for licensing fees after the 1 year of federal funding has ended. So we kind of just give them a guide to that, but it would be, it's a pretty simple sort of like, just like well, not even a 1-pager. It's like maybe a 3-pager, but it'd be great to have like a more proper guide.
Yeah, his is like, I don't know, 13 to 15 pages. It's got screenshots, click here, do this. You need to have all, I mean, he's incredibly detail oriented. And he actually does have his own FNS number for his farm. So
I think it's so interesting to what the opportunities are for, sorry, I'm reading this now. SNAP, I mean, the rules for SNAP actually exclude doing that for more than 2 weeks. I believe that's what's stated in the farm bill, is that you can only pay upfront for 14 days in advance of food that you receive. Is that still correct, Holly? You look like you're about to.
Yes, and so okay, that's a really interesting thing, because that's what the federal guidelines say, but it's actually not written into the code, into the law. So yes, that's what FNS thinks. However, they can't actually process that. However, just to keep it simple, we're doing the same thing Fair Share is doing, where we say, okay, SNAP covers the first 2 weeks, and then Double It Food Bucks covers the second 2 weeks. So if FNS gets finicky and starts, trying to figure out what's going on, which they're never going to do because there's like 2 of them, I don't see that that's going to be a problem. But you're right.
Yeah.
They say that it's just not coded.
Yeah, the law is too. I mean, that you have to do it in person unless you have this licensed stuff for, everything has to be in person, but there are bajillions of SNAP transactions every day and no one is really.
That's exactly why we use
They're
the
not
offline
auditing
vouchers.
them. They're not
offline
auditing.
Vouchers don't have to be in person.
That's interesting.
The offline voucher program was developed for rural farmers who don't have phone lines or don't have internet bandwidth and, you know, don't have like the real-time access.
We use those as well. We end up having to have 2 different licenses for processing because of this, though, because we use both the Total Pay Go on an iPad, which is of course licensed to the device, which means that when we have 15 pickup locations, we can only actually use it in one at a time. So that's a challenge. And then we also use the offline manual vouchers that our volunteers then run, all using our FNS number. It all gets really confusing very quickly. And we have to make sure, the problem with the offline vouchers, of course, is that they have to be run twice. So you have to call it in, get the authorization number, put the hold on the funds, and then you have to actually process it through the device. Do you not have to do that? Because we don't get paid automatically with those. You look like you're squinching at me.
Yeah, no, we process once and then we just go in and clear the vouchers.
Yeah, they clear them through like a device though, right?
Well, a computer. I mean, so we do all of the processing, we get all the authorization numbers, and then 2 weeks later, yeah, we don't use the device, we use the telephone. We use a smartphone.
Huh.
And then you just go in, it might be we have a different third-party processor, but you go in and you just click clear voucher and they all clear and it's done.
Wow, I want to find out about what you're using, Holly, because recently I've had to go through, and because we have to do it twice, and then we have to have volunteers make sure that I get the thing back, and we have so many processes to make sure that happens. Plus we have to do the reimbursement through the produce perks in addition to get the second part of it. So basically there are 6 different platforms that I'm using to process these things. And wow. I'm the executive director. So I just spent like a lot of hours last week trying to chase down July's transactions, which is not what I want to be spending all of my time doing. But, you know, when you have hundreds of volunteers, it can get really complicated very quickly because you're relying on folks to be redundant and thorough. And that's a challenge.
Yeah, no, we just have we have one spreadsheet. It's a pretty glorious spreadsheet, I gotta say.
I bet.
But we have one spreadsheet and we have one processor who manages our, you know, 450, 480 members. And I think she spends 10 to 15 hours a month.
Mm-hmm.
She's part-time. And her salary is paid for by our state budget.
Nice. Well, let me hook up with you for sure, because I want to find out what you're using.
Yeah, we use God, I don't even remember our third-party processor anymore.
Well, I was just going to say, for any farmers who are listening, I think there's a lot of benefit to using Total Pay as a third-party processor. The equipment is really relatively affordable. It works with a smartphone. You just get a swiper. Also, that I think that Total Pay is the only third-party processor that MarketLink will reimburse for. It certainly is in New York. So for future reimbursements, farmers have to use Total Pay to get reimbursed through the New York State Farmers Market Federation. And also Glenwood, we have been using Elevon as our third-party processor, and I just found out that they have no offline voucher process. So not all of them do. For the new online SNAP processing with Grown By, they're using WorldPay, which has much higher licensing fees. So that's the other thing to think about, is the cost. But I would say if you're a farmer, just go with Total Pay.
This is its own, like, you know, rabbit hole of, because I think that we started with Total Pay because of MarketLink. That's how we got hooked up with it in the first place. And we've been using GoEBT for a very long time. Even getting the offline vouchers though is sort of a challenge because they'll give them to us for free. The state used to provide them and they don't any longer. But so everyone's like moving to this, you can buy them, but they're like $8 for 25 vouchers, which is not enough when you have to do them every week.
We print our own.
Nice.
No one ever sees them, right? We actually don't even
No.
print them. They're just online. We just have all the same information. Who cares what piece of paper it comes on?
Yeah, yeah. And our own. I like you. These are just dumb things because you have to do it. So MarketLink reimburses for total pay. And somehow we got hooked up with a different processor for having to have a literal device, like I just showed you. And you get stuck in these processes and it's not easy to figure out ways to get around them. And it's not clear to me that anyone really knows what all of the different third-party products, there's no, like, who's the expert on this?
Well, the USDA published a list of not a complete, but a list of vendors, but they haven't updated it in like 15 years.
So that's helpful.
No.
Total Pay Go was made by Novadia Group, which then like a few years ago was out of money completely and
Right.
wasn't going to work anymore. And so like all of the farmers markets in multiple states were losing their minds trying to figure out how they were going to process SNAP.
Yeah, Novadia Group is now Total Pay. Right, they somehow saved themselves. I don't know the details.
I think an investor came in with some money and fixed it, is what happened, took over. But it's a wild little goose chase to figure all this out.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There is a deep rabbit hole here that we could go down into just on the specific processing of payments aspect. I think Grown By, obviously they have already moved forward with using WorldPay for the online SNAP processing.
I don't think
But
that was their choice. I think that was on the FNS side. I think that was a decision that was made at the USDA.
Yeah, so that's what they have to move forward with. Grown By is a partner with the CSA Innovation Network, so I think they could be a good resource going forward for anyone who is curious about the different options that might be out there, even if it's not what Grown By ended up having to go with.
I know that they're in conversation with the USDA to figure out how, going forward, if they're going to continue to use WorldPay or switch to another processor. So I think it's not necessarily set in stone forever.
Right. That's good to know that there might be future options out there. But yeah, I think we would love to talk with them more about all of those potentials on the horizon, even though this is the first step. But I think I want to pull back a little bit to something that Holly mentioned, and then lead us into another question before we wrap up. So just maybe one more piece of conversation here that's sort of around funding the admin side of these programs. So we've talked about funding streams for the actual subsidies or the vouchers, or just, being able to use state double up food bucks to cover the cost of CSA shares. Where are you all pulling from to actually support the staff time, the administrative work that goes into the implementation of these programs? Holly, I'll start with you if you just want to reiterate or confirm that you mentioned you have someone who's on the state salary because you implement the state level program.
So it's not purely state. So like I said, we use our state funding to match our GusNIP applications, our GusNIP grants. And so just every year after we get the state budget and or every time we get money allocated, whether it's from the state or on the off years from GusNIP, our whole coalition, the Farmers Market Association, the food bank, all of us sit down and we put a big budget together. And so a portion of the salary will come from the state and a portion of the salary will come from the GusNIP. We just make sure that we've got the line items in for personnel. And so we have 3 people part-time funded. So we have executive director funds, we have project manager funds, and then we have our processor funds through, you know, the combination of that. We've got this big master budget. And so just depending on which time, which fund runs out, you know, we figure out which bucket to pull it from. But yeah, it's a combination of that. And all 3 of those are part-time positions. I think our processor, like I said, she's 10 to 15 hours a month. Our project manager, he's also 10 to 15 hours a month. And somehow as ED, I'm the one who spends a bajillion hours, not being project manager or processor, but, you know, talking in forums and solving problems and that kind of stuff. So at the beginning, I anticipated they could do all the work and, you know, I can do the outreach, but that's not how it really shakes out.
Yeah, and we had a GusNet pilot that we've closed out. That was just a 1 year that we ended up extending into 2 years because of COVID. And so since then we're funding the entire program, which is still small, just through individual donations and private foundations. This year we got a local community foundation supported the program to expand into 1 additional site. Yeah, and so this is just part of my time. And then my colleague Megan and Kate, they both, you know, contribute a few hours here and there. Kate mostly on outreach and Megan just sort of on overall strategy and that kind of thing. But it's, yeah, so it's mostly just, yeah, our general funding. But hopefully, yeah, actually, I wanted to say, hopefully we'll have GusNet funding. We'll know shortly, I think, one way or the other. And then we also just found out that in New York State, specifically, the state just released an RFA through the Department of Agriculture and Markets. Through Fresh Connect, which is a New York State program, and it's their CSA for SNAP program. And so they are making grants of up to $50,000 and funding up to 25% administrative costs, or 20%. So I think that's something promising that I think a lot of groups are looking at, not just us.
We, our local manager of the Produce Perks Incentive Program here has advocated for market stipends for each of the markets that are participating. So for the various programs, there's a small stipend. It's only like, I think we get like $1,500 a year or something. So it's pretty minimal, but it is built in there for some of the processing that we have to do. Our program, we're more operational than fully administrative, because I do spend time out with customers stacking literal vegetables every week. So, and our program manager and everything does too, because we're an aggregate. So we're doing the programming itself, not just delivering the funds back and forth. But we have 3 full-time employees that are year-round at City Fresh. So I'm the executive director. Then we have a program coordinator and a farmer liaison who is sort of our driver and support. We also have a Vista, and we do some part-time seasonal work to help coordinate distribution of shares. And we also have part-time contractors for bookkeeping and for development. So we are basically 3 full-time employees, 2 part-time-ish seasonal, and our budget is about $400,000 a year. So if you're thinking about the size of an organization in that regard, we do partial revenue through sales. A huge chunk of which, of course, goes to our farmers directly. And then for our overhead, we also utilize any grant program we can, really. A lot of community foundations. We have not done a federal grant since our inception. So that's always on the horizon, though. So we're just piecing things together through project grants. And then we have 3 community foundations that actually fund us in fairly large chunks to do general operating. So that's how we're funded. It's very thin margins. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, and Anna, because I thought you brought up a really good point about the stipends for distribution sites. We also do that, and it's a $1,500 stipend just to make sure that, yeah, because we're putting that processing labor on other folks, and we should, yeah, always want to compensate people for their work.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you all
so
for touching on that quickly.
Just to chime in, our farmers market colleagues, they also have a stipend, and I believe it's $1,500 per market. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Yeah, at Fair Share, just to close us out, we are also fairly scrappy. We do use a couple of federal grants that contribute to some of the administrative salary of a couple of our positions, including mine. But otherwise, we rely on it pretty heavily to support partner shares, as I talked about earlier, through community funds, private donors, fundraising events, things like that. So great to hear the different options that are out there. And Annika, I appreciate your perspective on the specific size and amount of funds that you're pulling on for your organization. This is all the time that we had scheduled. There is a lot more that we could have talked about today, even with this small group. Very much appreciative of each of you all as speakers, and Tavis, who had to hop off earlier. We will get the recording for this conversation out to the entire CSA Innovation Network here very soon, along with a one-pager resource that we've put together with some notes on everybody's programs and some helpful resource links. And you can follow up with anybody after the fact if you've got more questions about implementing nutrition incentives or SNAP in CSA. So thanks everyone for joining us. I can hang out on the line for a few minutes if anyone has other questions, and otherwise we will go ahead and call it a day. So thank you all.
Thanks, Sadie, for putting this
Thanks
together.
very much, Sadie. Thanks, everyone.